Good morning, everybody. This is not what you're going to be learning today. Let me just bring this up. Hey! Huh? How's it? How's it going? It is Friday all day long. Ladies, gentlemen, Leon. So, week 3. We're at the end of a week. Gives you a chance to sort of reflect on how it was. How was it? How has it been? I guess it's still being, but so far, how has it been? Except for Wednesday, right? The lecture was awful. Uh, what a growly voiced monster. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to make it all about me. What was so tough about Wednesday? Just the Ajax stuff? Okay, yeah. So did you feel you needed like a few more exercises on Ajax itself, maybe? Yeah. And that's good feedback. I'll consider that. You should also like put that on the compass sheet. What's it? Just be like, we should use more exercises. This is a good example of a technique where, did I talk about the WTF method? Have I mentioned that? Okay. So the WTF method, I'll say a little bit about the history, which is that when I got here, apparently there was this, I was given the Lighthouse Labs glossary, and apparently WTF means, what's that for around here? And I had a student who was frustrated with a particular language feature. I think it was like week 1. She was frustrated with Switch. Someone introduced her to Switch, and she was like, what's that? I'm like, I don't know. And I made a file called switch.wtf.js. And she was very frustrated, so we were very sweary in this one. And I'm like, yeah, switch. What's that for? .js. And I just did a few demos of like, let's try putting stuff into switches and let's see how they work, right? And this became a methodology for me. This became a big part of how I learn. This became a big part of how I develop, right? If there's a library or a technique or something, and you try to put it into a project, then you have like all your confusing head stuff about your project and all your confusing head stuff about the new technique or library. So when you are faced with something like this, it's good to sort of like, okay, you know what? Let me do like what's the most basic example of Ajax I could do? What's the most basic example of this particular library I could do? And this is a discipline. Like this is something I have to keep on telling myself to do. I've been working on a Sudoku game, and I found a Sudoku library. I'm like, cool, I'll just put that in. And then part of me was like, Joel, you know what happens. It's not going to work, and you're going to the way you expect it to. So one of the things I'll be doing today is just making a file and kind of going into Sudoku and there's like, okay, let me see what this thing does. Let me see what it outputs. Oh, it outputs this, and that'll do that. Okay, that makes sense. So this is definitely an example where, like obviously we should build more assignments for that, and we definitely, you're part of an iterative educational environment where we're always getting better and we're always learning. So the level of quality you have is because we have gotten better and we've taken that feedback and turned it into more. So that's definitely good, but it's also as you're going in your career, it's good to like, okay, I don't understand how this works. I'm going to take it out. I'm going to isolate it all on its own. I'm going to sort of figure it out. It's like if you were learning a piece of music and there was like this really difficult part, you wouldn't start from the whole beginning or have the whole band with you. You'd be like, okay, I'm going to try this. Da, 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 da. And then you'd start like getting it up to speed. This is one Paganini piece I've been wanting to work on, and I've been practicing like really slowly. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. All right, that's that. How are we feeling just about front end in general? Is anyone getting like, what I get when I work in front end is that like just an electrode straight to the reward center of my brain? Because like it looks pretty, right? It looks like it works. And that's anyone else get that? That's not, yeah, Joe. That's your mileage may vary. I have ADHD. I am very distracted by like shiny things, right? But yeah, yeah. Okay, so today you have a lecture that is technically 2 lectures. Because we are going to be talking about oh, I'm not in the right cohort even a little bit. We're going to be talking about responsive design and SAS. So this is 2 subjects we're going to be talking about that have to do with CSS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just talk about one and kind of where it fits, and then talk about another one. But they're they happen to be 2 topics that have a lot of CSS, but they're very different. So this is going to be like, ever see a movie where it's like there's just a bunch of like vignettes and it's like, I don't know if anyone's watched The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Yeah. It's a Western from the Coen brothers. It's on Netflix right now. And it is not necessarily an easy watch the entire time, because it's very morbid. It's kind of all about there's these 6 stories that have kind of do with the main theme is the inevitability of death, but they're all fun Westerns in some ways. And it's got Tom Waits, and it's got James Franco. It's got James Franco in this really hilarious scene where he tries to rob a bank, and the bank teller gets the better of him in a very funny way. I'm not gonna ruin it for you. Okay, I'm going to ruin it for you. At one point, the bank teller comes around the bank. You don't see him for a bit, and he's like in his long underwear and covered in pans. And James Franco's pointing at him, shooting at him. He's like, "Pan shot!" It's very funny, and then he's hanged. All right, so anyway, so this is more like that. This is such a diversion. I apologize. This is so it's more like we're doing two lectures, 2 mini lectures that are only like slightly connected with each other. Okay? And we're going to talk about responsive design and SAS. I'm not sure. I think I'm going to start with SAS, and then do responsive design after the caffeine is kicked in for you. All right? So, yeah. Oh, I know. It's horrifying. Ugh, my body's wrong. SAS. What is SAS? In this context, I suppose I should narrow it down. SAS is a language. SAS language stands for Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets. It's CSS with superpowers. Okay, so my first real proper web development job, I was working for a company that was doing kind of a lot of websites. So websites mean you do a lot of CSS stuff, so I often had the situation of like, I'd be given a Photoshop file. Photoshop files, when you're working with design, tend to end up being like site underscore v2, site underscore v3 underscore final, site underscore v3 underscore final underscore revised, site underscore v3 underscore final underscore revised underscore with notes. And like, okay. So it would be my job to take a thing and make a bunch of CSS and all that, right? And that was just what I kept on doing. And that whole thing of like, oh, then they'd send it back to the end user and they'd be like, oh, we changed our blue. And you'd come back, be like, they changed their blue. I'm like, I've changed the blue everywhere. It was really frustrating to maintain and upgrade and update CSS. CSS is one computer language that is really built for the computer and not for you. Right? It still loads better than having to put everything in a style tag. Although in React, there's kind of a push to sort of do that more. But that's another story entirely. Forget I said anything about React. Remember the things before that. and remember things I said after that. It's a very specific forgetting. Don't forget what I told you to forget. Okay. So yeah, and it was really frustrating. A thing would change, and we'd have to like go through and figure out how many places and how many files that changed. Right? You change a color, and you have to kind of trace through and find that color. And it wasn't necessarily as simple as Control-Shift-F, because there'd be like, okay, we've changed this color, but you have to change this thing, and it was very laborious. And I was at the point where I was like, I am tired of this. I'm going to invent a new CSS. And it's going to have variables and probably extend classes. Right? I have no idea how to build a language because I am just starting. I am going to figure it out. That is what I'm going to do. And then part of me was like, maybe I should Google to see if this already exists. And behold, it did. Now, at the time, the language in question that I found was called less CSS. Now less JS? I don't know. And it had variables. Oh, huzzah! I have variables. There's been a few of these languages since, but the idea is that you can write in ways that are comfortable for you. You can write with things that make it easier to be a programmer in this day and age, and still be able to output CSS that's good for the machine. So the idea with Sass is that you can write code that generates CSS, which I think is cool. So I'm gonna pull up the Sass playground and show you kind of what that looks like. Okay, so to start with, CSS or SCSS. There's two syntaxes for Sass. There's SASS and SCSS. Okay, but SCSS is a superset language of CSS, which means all valid CSS is valid SCSS. So you already know a whole bunch of SCSS. Congratulations. That's like showing up to a game and finding out that just by showing up you'd already won like 16 levels. Okay. Cool, cool, cool. So I can have a class. Right? And I can have some sort of ID. Okay. So we have the ability, the alchemists have transmuted CSS to CSS in a different file. Oh, the wizardry. Okay, so we haven't gained much, but we also haven't lost anything. Okay, so, well, that's cool. But another thing we can do is we can declare variables. And the way we declare a variable is that we preface it with a $. We say what the variable name is. And then just like, we're going to use the colon, we're going to say what our value is. Well, it doesn't seem like it did anything. Okay, so we have variables. Here's the great thing about SCSS, by the way, is that if you just use SCSS for it's just CSS with one extra feature, that's cool. If you use more stuff, also cool, why not? But if you just are I just want CSS with variables, yeah, go ahead. Fill your boots. Okay. Now, I'm going to have to start putting this in an actual file folder here, so just so we can kind of keep track of what's going on and so I can write the demo later. So Sass demo. I have an index.html. Okay. And let's make an H1 here. That is all right, so I'm going to build a Sass. I'm going to put a Sass folder here, and I'm going to have a index.scss. And I'm going to say that example of like or maybe you're just going to say H1s. Okay. Now, there are a lot of different tools and a lot of different frameworks. You may have seen here that this says Dart Sass. You may have seen that there's Dart Sass, Lib Sass, Ruby Sass, right? There's also a Node Sass. So there is, like, Sass is available in lots of frameworks. There's lots of tools, too, that are just like, oh, I'm just going to watch your Sass files. And so it doesn't really matter which one I use. I'm going to use the Ruby one because I'm a little more comfortable with it. But it doesn't matter which one. It's all going to do the same thing. So what I'm going to do, so I'd say clear here, I'm going to say Sass, or cd Sass dem. Am I not? Oh, no, fair enough. There we go. And I am going to Sass / index.scss. And this is what it puts out, right? H1 colored tomato. Acceptable. If I look at Sass help here, yeah, so I have options, I have my input, and I have my output. So I am going to say that Sass index.css, I want to go to styles / index.css. Let me make directory styles, do that again. Okay, so now I have run this, and as you can guess, I have that. I also have a source mapping. Anyone heard of source maps yet? All right, so this is cool. One of the small obsessions of the, like, especially the front-end development community is you have the language that runs in the environment, and you build things in another language that compiles to that language. It is, off the top of my head, let me see how many languages I can think of that compile to JavaScript. CoffeeScript, TypeScript, Flow, PureScript, Reason, ClojureScript, Iced CoffeeScript, totally a thing. There's the whole Babel compiler, so kind of like whatever features you want to throw in. DogeScript. There's a language called DogeScript that was written by a high schooler. JavaScript for the moon. This is DogeScript. Such go to the moon, much Doge. Very moon is false. Really Doge is a Doge. Moon is true. Wow. Wow, moon. Please go to the moon with the Doge. Which compiles to JavaScript. This is the thing. I like how the this is a single line comment. This is DogeScript. This is a multi-line quiet, loud. Trained is use strict. It's so stupid, but it's just kind of a mania of JavaScript. I can't explain it. So so here's what I'm going to do. Here's what a source map is basically, is that when you have one of these languages that compiles down to JavaScript or CSS, you can say, here's a script, not a script tag, it's a link tag, and styles/index.css. And yeah, this is Sass, and I'm going to go to my sources here. I'm going to go to my styles index.css. So here's my index.css, but also here is my Sass color red. And when I look at my elements, color tomato because of index.scss3. It's that color because here's my SCSS. So I can like read and debug my SCSS in the browser. And the same thing, I can read and debug my Babel or my JSX. JSX, there's another one. Totally forgot about JSX. That's 10. It's 10 I came up with just off the top of my head. Right? Yeah. So I'm able to look at my source code, and my compiled code maps onto my source code. And I can take a look at it. Code. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a few more features of Sass, and then we're going to get coffee, which I have not yet had. And I'm maintaining this level of energy without coffee, which means bad things start happening. One thing I said was we were able to do that. Now, one of the points of Sass is that it becomes a language that really works when you have like big projects. It really works when you do complex things. So one of the things we might have then is that we may have like we want to have like even if this is helping us build more CSS, it still might create big files. Well, under HTTP 1.1, it's definitely better to send one big file than a bunch of little files, because like one of those might get lost, or just reasons. Just go with me on this one. And so we might want to be able to build one big file, but as a coder, it's easier to work with many files, right? So here's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to change one thing about my output here. I think there's an example here that's going to. Let me see if I can do this. Sass watch. Yes. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm now watching any file I make in Sass is going to. I may have to re-update this sometimes if I add new files, but here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new file here called vars. And here I'm going to put okay, and now you'll see, well, it's made a Sass cache. We can tell it not to do that. But you can see also it made a vars.css, which is empty, which is lame. But the reason we did this is so that we could say import vars. Right? So now instead of creating the vars.css as well, it updates this. So now I have one file, but the whole point of it was that. Okay, well let's stop this again. I'm going to get rid of that vars CSS because I do not want them. But I do this, and it still writes vars. How can I get this to ignore? Well, if I just preface it with an underscore, and you'll see it deleted the vars. So this underscore says, hey, the entire purpose of this is so that I can actually import it into another file. Another cool thing about this, by the way, is that it is a compiler, which means it's going to tell me when I have a problem. So it's going to catch it early, which is handy. That's one of the great things about compilers, is that there's a whole class of problems with your code that it will catch early before you have to like put it out to something. When I was a starting developer, I hated my compiler because it was always yelling at me. And then I learned what Oscar Wilde once said: a good friend is one who stabs you in the front. And that's what a compiler does. There's a line from Proverbs: faithful are the wounds of a friend, but an enemy multiplies kisses. That's to say, your enemies will speak well of you while doing ill to you. But your friend will be like, listen, you're a jerk. You should probably fix that. You're not a jerk, Leon. You're like the nicest person I've ever met. I didn't want to look anyone in the eye and say that for whom that might even be remotely true, so they're not like, he knows. So this is basically telling me, like, hey, this isn't going to work out the way you wanted it to, just so you know. JavaScript doesn't have this step. So it's just like, I did my best to do what you wanted me to. You're just like, oh, JavaScript, you just should have told me this wouldn't work. Okay, so we have the ability to now make many files and kind of bring them together. We have variables. This is all absolutely amazing. And if this were all you got, man, that's a huge win. We could stop here. We're not going to. Because there's more than just this. So I'm going to make another file here. I'm going to call it buttons.scss. It's just going to go @import vars @import buttons. And so one of the things about this is that it's going to go in order. So buttons has access to all the vars now, if that makes sense. So when I do this index.css, I can use any variable described in vars in buttons because it's a very top-down process. Which I don't know how I feel about that, truth be told, like between you and me, but hey, whatevs. Blue, let's go for deep sky blue. Oh, I should do a green. No, I'm going to do a yellow. And I'm going to make that one, I'm really torn between khaki or papaya whip. Nah, it's way too light. Yeah. Okay. So now I have this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a button class, right? In my index.html here, I'm going to create a p tag. This p tag is going to have button.button. I is button. Okay. So I haven't done anything with this yet, so let me actually style a button. I'm going to say that a dot button is going to be, I don't know, font size 1em, and pixel border radius 0.25em. What's an M? I will talk about that later. That's you. That's what you sound like. Joel, what's an M? It's not what anyone here sounds like. Okay, but I want to have a few different buttons. I want to have a few different buttons in a few different colors. Okay, so like I want to have button yellow. Or let's start with button blue. And button blue is going to have a color of white, background of blue, and maybe a border color of like, oh, by the way, I have functions. I have some functions I can use. I create functions of my own, but I have awesome functions. Like, darken blue by 0.1, maybe? I don't know. That looks like a thing. All right, let's go back to the index.html. Make this also a button blue. I need to darken that by more. Also, I don't know. I think I made this by 20%? Yeah, that's better. Oh, maybe 3 pixels. Yeah, okay. There's my blue button. And let's make a green button. All right, so we need some of that styling. Let's go button green, also color white, wilt, right? Background green. Do I not have? No, I don't have a green. That's right. I have. Let's do red. 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 Go back to my index.html. IR button. Okay, so I have these two buttons, but one of the things that drives me a little bit crazy about Bootstrap is that I have to, like, if I'm saying button blue, can't it already be assumed that I mean that it's also a button? It just happens to be a blue button, right? Doesn't that make sense? Isn't that a thing? So it'd be nice if I could just say button blue and button red and have them that, but they don't that. They do this. I'm not thrilled. So what I can do is there's a few different ways of doing this. I'm going to show you the first one, and it's extending. So I'm going to say that button blue at extends button. So now this happens. How did that happen? Well, if I inspect this, I can see that it has some things from button blue, but it also has some things from .btn blue. And if I make button red at extend button, same thing's going to happen, and now it's button blue and button red. So now all the rules for .btn are going to extend there. Now the question is, do I ever use .btn on its own anymore? Well, let's say that I don't. Let's say that I always want it, if you use .btn, it's because you're using one of the specific color versions. Well, how do I make it so that btn is not going to be used by itself? It's not an option, and it's not clouding up my, I want someone to be able to, I don't want someone looking through the add new class and being like, oh, I have a button one available. By the way, this exists and is awesome. Also hover, you can do all sorts of fun stuff here. Not the point. Yeah, got it, everyone. Cool. What I can do is I can add something to make this an extend-only directive, so that its whole purpose is to be extended. For any of you playing the computer science home game, this is similar to an abstract class in object-oriented programming. And for those of you for whom that was gibberish, cool. So, oh, not that. Oh, dot button blue failed to extend dot button right. So I have to change these two as well. See, a compiler. It's a friend who stabs you in the front. And now when I look at it, it's button blue and button red that have all these attached to it. This is one of those methods. I will say, have you guys met David Van Dusen? He was an instructor here for a long time. He comes in from time to time. Great guy. You might, if you look back at some of the lectures, you might find his. He's now working at Bench, doing front end development there. And I don't know that I have seen this for myself, but one of the things is that his thing is that when you use extend, it creates a lot more code. And apparently with Compass, they were having a big, Compass uses Sass, and he's kind of building a whole bunch of stuff. And then it was like, okay, there's kind of, it's kind of too, the CSS was becoming way too big. And David took a look at the Sass and saw a lot of extend. He's like, that's your problem. He's like, extend is going to bloat your files. Trade all of those out for, well, the thing I'm going to show you in a second, mixins. They're like, really? Is it really? Yeah. And he went through, and it reduced the CSS file size by like half, or some other ungodly number. This is very anecdotal and not very scientific. But here's what we're going to do. So we're going to have all of this. We're basically going to take the things that we can rewrite, and we're going to make this directive. And a directive, or sorry, not a directive, that was a directive that I made before, a mixin. And a mixin starts with @mixin, and it's like button. And it's going to have this stuff. Oh, by the way, another note. These comments work now in Sass. If you make a comment like this, the //, it will not go into your CSS. If you make like a CSS style or C style comment, that will go into your CSS. So it's actually a good way to debug your Sass. But, mixin button. So I'm going to take everything that was in here. And I'm going to say, dot button blue, dot button red. They include button. Include button. Okay? And now they have, the styles are still there. Button blue now has all the things. Button red still has all the things. Okay, it's hard to see how this is better, but it's also, and this is also really, really cool. These are, mixins are also functions that can take parameters. So I can pass in a color if I want to. Then I can say that color white and background color. So I'm doing that twice, right? So I can make some really cool stuff like that. Now, I've shown you a lot of features. And at this point, I'm sure you're like, okay, it has features. Let me talk to you about birdhouses for a moment. You know, at one point, I'm going to be doing one of these like Swift abrupt subject changes. and it's actually going to go off under just like me talking about birdhouses for no reason. You're going to be like, oh, Joel finally lost it. That's what happened. You're never you're never going to know what happened until like 5 minutes in. Birdhouses. Joe, we're going to build a birdhouse. What do you need to build a birdhouse? Some wood. Okay. Probably a saw and some hammer and some nails. Yeah, what else? Some birds. Yeah, okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. And a measuring tape maybe, yeah. Probably a pencil, right? Now, I'm not going to hold you to this, but approximately how long do you think it would take you to build a birdhouse? A couple hours? All right. And, okay. So, who here feels comfortable with the task, build a birdhouse? Now, do you have so little faith in yourself that you don't think you could build a bird? Like, nope, would nail myself with the fingers. Just like, bah, bah, aww. Google would help too, right? And who feels like, maybe an afternoon or a couple hours, that's about the right period of time, depending on how ornate a birdhouse you wanted, right? And this would be just a matter of like just kind of cutting the wood into the right shapes and then nailing the wood into place, maybe some gluing and nailing and whatever, right? And then you have a birdhouse. Okay. Now, building a doghouse. Who has built a doghouse? Anyone here? Yeah, me neither. So with a doghouse, would you just get the right amount of plywood and then just nail it together and leave it out there? Like you would at the birdhouse? No, that would fall over and if not hurt the dog, seriously annoy it. Right? To build a doghouse, now you have to actually start putting in some framing and maybe even some like shingles and that sort of thing. So that So all of a sudden, we make something that's bigger. More is not just more of the same. More is different. When things get a little bit bigger, we have to change our techniques around to do something. Our timelines become very different. The things that we need become very different, right? I could bring in the appropriate materials, and we could all make birdhouses for an afternoon. That'd be fun. Building a doghouse is going to take a little more time. And then you upgrade that to a shed. Okay, well then, similar principles to the doghouse, but on a much bigger scale, and you got to be much more structurally sound, right? And then a human house. Oh man, there's a lot there. And then you start needing like permits from the city. Actually, in some sheds, you need permits as well, right? You start getting a bigger scale, and then you look next door here. Like the techniques used become huge. Now, I want you to imagine that you try to take the same rigor and techniques you would take to build a human house and use it to build a birdhouse. You like pour a foundation, right? You have like little tiny rebar, right? You build a frame. You have like weatherproofing. You have like insulation. It's going to take you more than a couple hours to build that birdhouse. It's going to take a little bit, right? When you get bigger, you need different techniques, but also the techniques that work with bigger things can be totally overkill when you apply them to a small project. And the same is true of SAS. So for me, SAS is great when I'm building something big, when I'm building something where I want reusable code, and when I'm building something that has like, I want it to generate a lot of CSS for me. Let me give you an example of generate a lot of CSS for me. Although I'm hoping this works, I think my code pen reset. That's not helping. I think that's me. I reset my stuff. I might have actually lost this file, which sucks. No, poop. All right. I made a deck of cards. I think I might be lost. It might be in my previous notes, and I'll find it. But the thing with the deck of cards is I made a CSS-only deck of cards, which I will now tell you about. And I just had a bunch of values, and I had to generate a bunch of data. And so I used SCSS to like take in, like, here's the names of all the ranks, or here's the values of all the ranks, here's the values of like the 4 suits, and it built out a card deck for me. Because you can also do like for loops and if statements and that sort of thing, and data and arrays and that sort of thing. And doing that by hand would have been really frustrating, but SAS is better. Man, what happened? It's going to drive me crazy. Maybe if I find this particular, I had a card flip. Ugh. Ugh, gross. Okay. All right. I'm probably not going to find it. That's fine. Man, that's going to drive me crazy. And how am I? Okay. Doesn't matter. I'll show them later. It's probably in the previous notes. But yeah, so it's great when you're doing big things, but it might not be appropriate for smaller projects. So don't feel that you have to use this. Don't feel like, oh, I'm not a real programmer if I'm not using SAS. SAS is great for bigger things, but it's also one of these tools that doesn't make as much sense when you build something smaller. And this is going to be true of bigger and bigger frameworks as you go along. And sometimes they're overkill for certain projects. And you make trade-offs. Okay, when we come back, we're going to talk about responsive design. And we're going to talk about how to make things look good, even through this. All right, be back in 10 minutes. All right, all right, all right, all right. Yeah. Let's do this. Still lecturing. Guys, I'm lecturing. It's okay. I forgive you. Okay. Right, so here's time for lecture number 2. It's going to be on responsive. This is a mobile device. Does anyone have a mobile device? Okay, this is supposed to be a really softball question. I'm pretty sure most of you have mobile devices, so just checking to see if I had your attention, and apparently I don't. It's fine. It's fine. So, yeah. The mobile device is kind of two things to note about it. When you are a developer, most of your web traffic, most of my web intake is on this device because I am in front of it all the effing time, right? So, when I'm looking up research things, when I'm looking at references, this is what I'm looking on. When it has to do with my work, this is what I'm looking on. When it has to do with not work, this is also what I'm looking on because I'm just always looking at this thing. And I get so used to thinking that this is the web. For people who are not programmers, what often happens is that the computer is what they look at work. This is what they look at when they are not at work. Right? So if you're building something that is client-facing, chances are this is actually going to be your target. If you're building something that's a B2B app, by B2B I mean business to business, something where it's like, oh, this is basically for work, yeah, you know what, you can plan for this whole, you can explore the space of this. But when you don't have that, it's this. Hold on, it's good. Sorry. Right, so that is the primary device that people look at. My wife is not a developer, and so this is the device that she looks at most is her phone. And that's really changed the game for web developers because we have to now plan for the narrowest straw through which you can drink the internet. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a few techniques for responsive. I'm not going to talk about responsive design. We don't really have the time for that. I'm not going to tell you how to plan for it. I'm going to show you a few techniques and tell you if you are interested in this, you should read up more on this. Okay? So we're going to start with, well, for one thing, we can stop SAS. Okay, so here's this website. Can somebody read to me the bottom line? Right, thank you. So each box here is 50 pixels wide. And I can, so let me bring up this. Okay, so sometimes when you're checking your responsive, you do this a lot. Okay, so that's pretty legible. There are tools here to let us replicate what it would look like on a mobile device. What? Let's look at the Galaxy S5. Pixel 2. Neg, can you read the third line, please? Like, no, I can't. So what happened? Well, this brings us to the rather puzzling, surprisingly philosophical question, what is a pixel? Michael, what's a pixel? Okay, so this is an interesting point. His description was something of X amount of, like, it's the unit of size, right? So there's the Cartesian unit, for, like a Cartesian grid, right? An XY thing. Okay. But a pixel is also a single, like it's short for picture cell, right? So it is a single point of light, an indivisible point of light. If you slice a pixel in half, you have 2 pixels. Like starfish. Right? So, like on construction signs, construction light sign. For instance, that is a pixel. Right? That is an indivisible point of light that you can't get any smaller than. So that's a pixel. And what happens is that when you have the first days of computer graphics, we're talking about cathode ray tubes, and you would kind of just like shine lights across, like you would basically like paint light across. As an avionics technician in the Air Force, I have actually maintained and repaired radar cathode ray tubes. I have shocked myself on them a couple of times. What ends up happening is that, like, they basically had this idea of, like, okay, we have the smallest pixel cell, a row and a column. You know what? That's going to be our Cartesian unit. We can't go any smaller than that, so fine, that's our Cartesian unit, right? And the thing what happened with pixels is they kept on getting smaller. The idea of a pixel kept on getting smaller, and we kept on using it as our Cartesian unit. But pixel had with it this basic expectation of how big it was. Which kind of coalesced around like 96 to 72 pixels per inch. Right? But thanks to our ongoing ability to make things smaller, the concept of a pixel as an individual points of light, it kept on getting smaller, and it grew way smaller than our expectation of pixel, the Cartesian unit that reflects movement in like an actual physical space. It changed what that looked like. So this concept of a pixel no longer reflected when we say, hey, font size is 12 pixels. Because this screen is effing amazing, right? So many pixels. Hold on, I'm just going to go back to this message. Seeing how long until you guys got irritated with me for doing that. Okay, so so what basically happens is that we have to now, when you put like, hey, font size is 12 pixels, what you were really meaning is the font size should be approximately 1/6 to 1/8 of an inch. That's what you meant, because that's what our eyes are able to perceive as like reasonable text. So what we can do is we can set a viewport. It's this little tag that we can put here. And it basically says, hey, our width is whatever the device width is. Our initial scale is 1 to 0. Now, if we look here, we said that each square was 50 pixels wide, right? So 1, so there's 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, almost 1,000. Well, now that I've set that viewport and we reload this, 1, 2, 3, 4. So a little bit around 400, which correlates to, yeah, it's about like, it's about 3 inches across. That makes 3.5 maybe inches across. That correlates to our expectation of that Cartesian unit. It's still itsy bitsy. Neg, if you please, the third line.
Affects a page. Simplify this example as much as possible. Font boosting has been disabled.
Thank you very much. Let's give Neg a round of applause. We all could. All right. For being such a good sport. Okay, so we have now the ability to pixels was really all about how much linear space it should take up in our actual world, not just how many individual points of light. So now we can do things like this. All right, cool. That's the viewport. Next thing I want to talk about is media queries. Now, who has done the thing where it's you can kind of see that you have the same page, but in this view, it's everything is 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you smoosh it, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, right? This kind of makes sense. Well, there is a technique for making that happen, and that's called a media query. In this case, what it does is it just basically says, hey, at different lengths, I'm going to apply different rules. Let's go take this off. So what I've set is a few breakpoints. And I'm going to say that at a minimum width of 960, so 960 or greater, I want the background color to be khaki. And behold, it's khaki. And then I say, well, at a min width of 480 and max width of 960, I want it to be deep sky blue. So I'm going to keep on going. Right? And then I have another one set at well, I have a set as my base case. And then I'm overwriting it over here. So So 480 is my other breakpoint. Wait for it. It's going to be really subtle. You might miss it. Woo! Browser rave! Okay, so we are now able to set different rules based on the width, which is pretty cool. Okay, so let me, there's also a version that lets us, and this is a really cool little feature that you can do for, if people move their phones like this, you can detect that as well. Because there is the portrait and landscape. So here's portrait. No, sorry, there's landscape, and here's portrait. And this follows through regardless of the size. iPad Pro, same business. This is also an excuse to, images. Portrait. National. I love this comic so much. The National Portrait Gallery, the National Landscape Gallery. It's such a simple joke, right? Because portrait's up and down, landscape is across. It's I love this one. God, kind of a lot. Ugh. Still cracks me up. I've seen it a bunch of times. Okay. Yeah. So we can do that, and that's cool. Let's actually see an example of this in play. So here is an example of columns. Now these columns are arranged to the side, but I might want to have special rules for how they collapse with each other. So take that off. Here they are. Oh. And it was kind of smooth. You didn't even kind of notice that it was happening, right? We just kind of figure out at different sizes, hey, this is what I think it should look like. This is what I think it should look like. Right? And all I did with this one is I said, okay, at this one I want at the top level, I want box 1 to 50%, box 2 and box 3 to be 25% apiece. And then I want you to sort of like shrink in. I kind of set what it should be at different sizes, including the base case of 100%. This is how the columns work, by the way, in like Bootstrap and Bowman, a few things like that. So yeah. So there's an example of using these to make something that looks really good at different sizes. Looks smooth at least, right? And I want to show you one of my tricks here. I used this trick before. I kind of love it. So here's a table, right? Has some info. Has a lot of info. And what happens is that the smaller this gets, the more it's really cramped. Right? It'll be hard to read this information. So what I do is when it gets small enough, it becomes these cards. So how did I do that? Well, has anybody seen The Prestige? There's this one trick that Michael Caine performs at the beginning. And now I think I should have prepared my Michael Caine impersonation because it's not ready. My name is Michael Caine. No, still needs work. Anyway. And so what he does is he does this trick where he has a bird in a cage and he puts the thing over it and he squashes the cage. And then all of a sudden out of his sleeve a bird shows up. Okay. I don't want to ruin this for you. But here's what happens. The first bird is instantly killed. And a second bird shows up. And the other bird is just kind of hidden away into a table or whatever. And this kind of starts to build a motif that we see in the thing. So what I do here is just a little bit of magic. It seems like it's all the same information, and I've just managed to somehow move it all over. But in fact, what I've done is it's the same information twice. So what I have here is a table with a body, and there's a TR here, class hidden XS, and visible XS. And what this means is, hey, when we're in extra small mode, this should be hidden. And you'll notice that this is not anywhere on the screen, right? Same thing here. This is visible XS, and all of this stuff is hidden. So what I have is, for each row, I have 5, is it 5? Yeah, 5 table cells that have their information that represent them. And now this one is hidden. But when we're in this smaller mode, all those guys, they get smushed. And it's this one that pops up. So it's actually all the same information in a DD. So yes, I've reduplicated the stuff on the page to make it a little more friendly. But that's a thing I can do. Why wouldn't I be able to do that? And this exemplifies two things. One is, okay, this is how we would make this work. This is how the technique works. But I also want you, for a moment, to think like illusionists. I want you to think like conjurers of cheap tricks. In my time working with CSS, it's been so many cheap tricks. It's been so many, like, I make it look like it's there, or it's like, it's actually hidden off in the side. I actually had a class that does this. I actually do a thing that does this. And I use tricks like this all the time to kind of make things look the way I want. But at the end of the day, it may be like, oh, well, I'm supposed to put the information there once. Or I've reduplicated it, or I'm supposed to take this information and refactor it this way. Like, why don't you just make a different version of that works that way? And so I exhort you to think and try to problem solve like an illusionist. All right? Okay. All right, the last thing I want to talk about. Oh, 10:25. Maybe we have more time. We'll see. We'll see how this goes. Is relative dimensions. Can you tell me what some units are, or sorry, relative units, I should say. What are some units we use in CSS? Pixels. Well played. M's and rems. That's right. Anyone got anything else? Percent. Yeah, that's the one. So the pixels are, you know, like we said before, they have like a relation to space. Any other ones generally have, they don't have as much of a relation to space. They have a relationship to what came before. So they are relative, right? And what I find myself doing is the more I go, the more I move away from putting pixels throughout my code. It's more important to keep things relative to each other than it is to keep them at a specific pixel size. That gives you something that's more flexible. That gives you something you can change later. It makes it more dynamic. It makes it easier to maintain and update. So what I'm going to do here is I have the HTML at font size 20. And here is my text. Now, everything here, I use a website called Typescale, a visual calculator. And it does things based on relations. I chose the major third, the 1.25. And my base, let's go 20. Right? And everything scales up and down based on that. So here, that's not what I'm looking for. Everything is, this is 80% smaller than this. This is the same size as that, and this is 80% smaller than that. So this is 64% of that, right? All of our font sizes are based on that growing. So here's one where the title is the same size as this, but smaller. This is even a smaller version. And everything kind of retains its ratios, which is what's the important part. Okay. But I have this problem with the text, which is that when I get smaller, it stays the same size. For me to read this on my mobile device, I gotta like takes a while. And this, well, that's another story entirely. So what I want to do is I want to be able to have smaller sizes for this. If I just scaled this down to like 15, okay, more legible here. But now This is smaller than it has to be. So I could easily, of course, just decide, well, I'm going to pick a breakpoint. I'm going to say at media, max width of, let's just say, 512 px. Let's kind of pull the number. HTML, font size, 15 pixels. Okay, that works. I have to find the right level for that, but sure, why not? There's also a really, really cool relative unit that I have really enjoyed using that is VW. And VW is a percentage of your viewport width. There's also VH, which is your viewport height. And on top of that, they were kind enough to give us Vmin and Vmax. Vmin is the smaller of your VW or VH. Vmax is the greater of your VW or VH. So what I can do here is I can say that I'm going to base my HTML is going to be font size, and let me pick 3 VW. Come on. And now the scales, well, it gets really big. Then it gets neg. Could you? I'm just kidding. All right, so it's a little small at this point. What would be nice is to have like, so now if we drew this out, it'd be like, and it just starts the thing and does a viewport width. It'd be nice to have like a minimum it went to. So, and again, this is effing amazing, and I love this. Because this is a thing I've been waiting to, like, okay, so I've been a web developer for like seriously professionally for about 8 years. And then there was like a bits before that, right? I kind of took a running start, like a slow start to get there. But I've been doing nothing but web programming for the last 8 years. And there were never more harrowing words than, all these great CSS3 features I couldn't use. And then I got to use calc. And calc can do math in the browser. So what I can do here is I can say calc. And I'm going to split the difference between these two methods. I'm going to say 10px plus 1.5 VW. All right. So now, here it is at this level. And then here's how it looks when I get bigger. I can change these values. I can say, actually, I want it to be like, it's a little big. Gets a little big, so now that's a little better. But it's still going to be at least 10 pixels when I get down to this size, right? Which isn't so bad. So I can set minimums and then let it grow from there. So these are a great way. So this is something I use a lot when I'm trying to do things that are responsive. When I'm trying to do things where it's like, I want it to be bigger, yeah, on a larger screen, but not like, I don't want it to take up the full width. Well, okay, well then maybe the width is going to be, I'm going to have a max width of 100%, but the width is going to be this, like minus, this plus some VW or minus some VW. And that lets me kind of limit it based on the size of something. And I found that really gives me a, when somebody are like, oh, that's like too big of the thing, but it's also like too small here. You can kind of like use these to massage that, which is, yeah, okay. I know you don't understand. I know you understand what I went through. I know you weren't there. I get it. You're here now. And this has saved me so much. And this lets me also do a lot of stuff just in CSS and HTML that I would have had to do with JavaScript at some other point, which is, again, gross. Right. Okay. Or I'd have to set like a bunch of breakpoints. Yes. Can you do non-linear relationships? I also love how, like, in Vancouver, that could just be like, I'm really into non-linear relationships right now. Can you do non-linear relationships? Yeah. I don't know. Let's find out. I can't imagine this is a thing. No, I think it was just like, no. Um, yeah, no, it is not happy about that even a little bit. Just be happy you have linear as an option. Okay, so I have 25 minutes. Okay, actually, I don't really have 25 minutes because I could let you go immediately and still feel good about myself. Guys, I waited a long time for CSS3. And I think this is a good time to talk about it. Christmas is it's Advent is a time of waiting for things to happen. There's excitement, the promise of salvation. And the thing I was looking to be saved from was floats. Oh, I hate floats. Oh, do I ever hate floats. Floats. I know how to do things with them. I know how to use them safely. It's fine. They did not give me as much freedom as I would have liked. So there was this feature that I always saw on the horizon. It was like, can I use it yet? And they're like, no. And it was called the flexible box layout module. So let me do a quick demo of Flexbox. I'm going to go to CodePen. I'm going to make a new CodePen. I really wish I could find my old stuff. And apparently the South Korea flag doesn't have a circle in the middle. I don't know. So create pen. So what I can do here is I can decide that I'm going to have flex container, and it is going to have box-1 1 plus box-2 2. Okay, and I'm going to say that I'm going to make this SCSS just to save myself a smidge of time. So what I can do here is, here's 1 and 2. I'm going to say that the box directive is padding 1em. Oh, and also maybe body font size 30 pixels. Yeah, padding 1em. I don't really need margin, but let's go background. Oh, it loves me that tomato. Color white, and then just say that box1 extends at box. Oh, box-1. And box-2 add extends box as well. Okay, so now these are one on top of the other as divs generally go, right? Well, what I can say here is that I'm going to make the flex container, I'm going to make it Instead of display block, it is going to be display flex. And now it puts them to the side of each other. And this gives me a ton more options. I could say justify content. Well, let me see how things go. There's like two axes. There's the main axis, which by default is row. So, and then the other option is column. And whichever is the main axis, the secondary axis is the other one. Right? So display flex. I want it to be, flex direction. Instead of being row, I'm going to make it row reverse. And now it's kind of reverse the order of them. All right. Let's leave that be for a bit. I could do a justify content to say how these things should go along the major axis. And what are my options? Well, the default is flex start. That's what's happening right here. But I can also say flex dash end. And now it says actually push it to the end of whatever axis. I can say flex end. I can say center. That puts it to the center. I can say, this is where it gets real. It gets real. Space between. I can say space around. I can say space evenly. I can say space fleet. That's not actually a thing. I just wanted to, sorry. That's not. Right? I can decide, one of them, I want them to fill up the space a bit, actually. Fill the space. I can say stretch and they'll kind of like, not stretch. No, I guess. I can say that, but I can also say of one of them, you know what? You're going to get a flex grow property. I want your flex grow is going to be 1. So now 2 takes up all of the remaining space. Well, let's say I gave box 1 a flex grow of 2. What just happened? Let me also what happened was, that's a terrible color. Gross. Why is it not okay with that? Oh, because there is no. There we go. So what happened was, basically 1 and 2 looked at each other and they're like, okay, we have all this space to divide up. And 1's like my flex grow is 2, and 2 is like my flex grow is 1. So however much space you get, it's going to be a 2-to-1 ratio. 1 gets 2/3 of the remaining space, 2 gets 1/3 of the remaining space. And they kind of keep that until they're back at par with each other. And there we go. Now, I want to sort of like, this is not meant to be a comprehensive thing. This is meant to be like, hey, this thing exists. You should find out more things. There's a Flexbox Froggy, I think, on the exercises, or something maybe that gets passed around. That's handy for like learning a bit of, like just using a bit of Flexbox. But yeah, this is a really useful thing, and it just totally blows the water. Floats out of the water because they float in the water. That's it. Okay, and they help solve a lot of these problems as well. There's also grid. I don't want to get into it because I will just end up salivating on my keyboard. They're so tasty, you guys. Grid is another one that I saw and I was like, no, it's too much to hope for. That's not going to make it through. And it has made it through, and I'm just like, I love using grid. Ask James, he'll tell you. I use a lot of grid. J-Mats, you there? Do I use a lot of grid? I do. He says I did. Whenever I can. Ain't no problem the grid can't solve. We'd like it to be 2 by 2 here, but 4, like 2 across here, but 4 across there. I can make that happen. Just kind of change my grid template, and then bam, bam. It all works. Anyway, are there any questions? For the Flexbox stuff, is there something we cover on Compass? I can never remember what the assignments are from day to day. Yeah, it's kind of a hey, Flexbox is a thing. Yeah. Right. So it's definitely worth kind of playing with. It would be worth going back over your tweeter and, for instance, remaking it with Flexbox. Doing some of the layout with Flexbox. But yeah, it's a thing that exists, but you have to look into it. Are there any other questions? Will, you look like you have a questioning face. All right, cool. Okay, in that case, I will send up my notes. Thank you all for your rapt attention. And good luck wrapping up them tweeters.